Hey, ladies and gentlemen, the second time's a charm, right? Well, we're going to discuss the recent shooting in North Carolina. We're going to talk about a letter that some retired military officials sent to President Macron in France, and we're going to talk about the president's executive order that was published in the last few days, and give some opinions on that. But before we get into it, please like, subscribe. Let me know in the comments how you think about, or what you think about the channel and where it's going. If you dislike what I have to say, then go ahead and hit dislike. Tell me in the comments. Subscribe and hate watch. Go ahead and do that. No, but I would like to say to all my subscribers, thank you. We've gone over 11,000, as I said before. I would not be where I am without your help. The merch is getting created now, and I have some pretty good ideas. I just want to be able to, I want to give a couple more looks and run it by a few people and see what they think. But I think I have some pretty good ideas for that. Uh, I wasn't on Monday because I decided to get a new camera, and after fighting with the camera for about 6 hours, I went back to my old camera, which seems to be working just fine. So that's going to get returned, and that upgrade will go away. What else? Friday will be a fairly amusing show, but I have an exclusive interview Friday that has definitive proof. It is an exclusive with definitive proof about what's really going on and who's running this country. So hopefully I will not get Epstein between now and Friday. Just keep that in mind. I also have a endorsement that we're going to talk about on Friday because apparently some people like people in their basement, angry men on YouTube, giving their opinions. Well, I wouldn't say I'm angry, but I do give my opinion on YouTube from a basement. With that, let's go ahead and get into it. All right. Now, one of the issues everybody's bringing up about this shooting in North Carolina, and on one hand, I agree with it. On the other hand, I understand why it's going the way it is. Now, with the shooting in Ohio, the video was released almost immediately. I mean, I'm willing to bet as soon as the chief had permission, that video was out there. Now, some people are saying, well, that's because it was there was less questions about the shooting itself based on the whole situation, but the video showed the events leading up to the incident itself and the post events, the post actions. But what I learned from going through some of these stories is Ohio does not have a law that they have in North Carolina. And the law in North Carolina says the sheriff cannot just release that video without permission from a judge. Now, lawyers and some members of the family have seen the video, and they said they lost count of how many rounds were fired while this incident was going on. And they've come out today and said the independent autopsy says that he died of a kill shot in the back of his head. Now, I wasn't present when it happened. I have not seen the video. So all we can do at this point is to go by what's being said. But as we saw with the Derek Chauvin trial, regardless of how you feel about the verdict, the thing is, justice was done in keeping with our system of justice. So let this go through the process. I know currently 3 deputies have resigned, 7 are on administrative leave while they go through the investigation. The FBI is involved investigating this, so that does say something about what they found so far, beyond just the rumor and innuendo. Now, the other part of this is the news comes as demonstrators come together for their 7th day of protest in wake of Brown's death. Now, when you're actually viewing this, it'll be the 8th day. But what I've seen so far in videos is they've actually been peaceful protests. They're out there, they're marching, they're carrying signs. They're not breaking windows, they're not setting things on fire. So to them, I say, stand up, make your voice heard. Do not let his death be in vain, but continue to peacefully protest. There is no need to destroy your own town. And I think that would not do the memory of Andrew Brown Jr. any good if you destroy Elizabeth City because of what happened. Peacefully protest, stand up for what you want. And hopefully at some point in the near future, we'll all get to see the video and make our own judgment about what happened. Now, speaking of protest, we'll transition internationally to France. All right, I'm going to go ahead and read parts of this article to you. Former generals and military personnel warned President Emmanuel Macron in a letter to act against the looming dangers of hatred due to social tensions, religious extremism, or face a civil war like situation in the future. It was signed by 20 retired generals, and more than 1,000 officials of different ranks and files, the military, police, yada yada. Now, here's what I'll say, and this is where it's kind of where France is a little bit different historically, and since World War II, the United States is. Okay, France came out of World War II. They went into their war in Indochina, or what we would know as Vietnam. They came out of that. A lot of the same veterans of Indochina later, especially in the Foreign Legion, were stationed in Algeria. And when the French government was ready to give Algeria independence, they disagreed with it. And they started an organization and started actually fighting the government and tried to take over Algeria. So this is why France needs to be a little bit more careful, because historically, history's cyclic. It repeats itself. So with that being said, do I see something like that happen in the United States? No. As someone who served for 23 years, who knows several senior officers and non-commissioned officers still serving, they would never turn against the Constitution or our elected leaders. That will not happen. My fear of a civil war in the United States is something very different. It is a very regional conflict, such as the powder keg that is Portland. You finally get people that say enough is enough, and I'm going to stand up, and we're not going to take this anymore. And that's a very scary scenario. It's a very dangerous scenario. And I don't want to see it come to that. I want to see us sit down and come up with a civil solution to what's going on. There are problems that need to be fixed. And now we have cities that need to be rebuilt. And we got to come up with money for that. But we're not going to solve anything by continuously creating these autonomous zones and destroying property. That's going to get us nowhere. In fact, it's the last count I saw was up to like 36 deaths with these autonomous zones and things like that. So let's give this some thought. And since we transitioned back to the United States, President Biden actually recognized by executive order the Armenian genocide during World War I. Now, I pulled up this article because I was fairly familiar with it. What I did not know, or I guess I've forgotten along the way, was how many people were killed. So I pulled up the article, so I'm going to go ahead and read it to you. By the early 20s, when the massacres and deportations finally ended, between 600,000 and 1.5 million Armenians were dead, with many more forcibly removed from the country. Okay, I got it. And even though it took 100 years, I'm glad he recognized it. From a standpoint of international relations and foreign policy, Turkey's an uneasy ally at this time. So do we really want to stir the pot on that one? I don't know. But by the same token, the president has information that we don't have. He has intelligence we don't have. So I don't know exactly what he was thinking, but I'm sure there was more to it than just trying to offend Turkey. Where I have a problem with it is there are currently approximately 1 million, if not more, Uyghur Muslims and Kazakhs and other Muslim minorities imprisoned in China. Funny enough, they're in the same province that Disney filmed Mulan. And thank the same security forces for their help in the filming that have these people in prison. I mean, what are you thinking? You're going to talk about, hey, thanks for helping us with our movie. Oh, by the way, don't worry about those 1 million people you have in camps. And as I talked about in my earlier China video, you also have a lot of, even the Washington Post came out with an opinion piece saying there's no way they could call them, I think they call them vocational training camps, but they're being referred to as indoctrination camps in the opinion piece. Now, indoctrination camps harkens back to the re-education camps of post-communist takeover of Vietnam or the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. And if you remember, there's a pretty, if you go with Gallo Zoomer on Cambodia, and they talk about how Pol Pot alienated half the population of Cambodia by killing the other half. Well, okay, he didn't kill half, but I think the figures I've seen were about a quarter of the population died in these camps. Now, the Biden administration not speaking out on this is very similar to what we saw during the Clinton administration with Rwanda. And part of the reason they don't want to talk about genocide is under the UN Charter, once people start saying genocide, certain actions have to take place. That's why it wasn't mentioned in Rwanda. And I have my own issues with that because the argument was not made to avoid saying it when you talked about Bosnia and Kosovo, where NATO did send in forces, where the U.S. did act unilaterally at one point. We're not even discuss what's going on in China. So, yes, great. You talked about the Armenian massacre that happened 100 years ago. What about the one going on right now? Ladies and gentlemen, have a good evening. Please like, subscribe, comment. It really does help the algorithm. If you disagree with what I'm saying, hit dislike and tell me why in the comments. Like I said, Friday, I've got an exclusive interview with somebody with proof about who really runs things. Next Wednesday, I'll be interviewing Ethan Thamby, who was involved with the lobby to get medical marijuana approved in the state of Missouri, and they were successful in that. Everybody have a good evening.